All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Community Engagement Institute Spring 2023 Rising to the Challenge Workshop Series. If we haven't met before, my name is Zane May. I work in organization at the Institute. If you're interested in learning more about CEI and our work, you can, of course, browse our website. In addition to that, we really enjoy connecting and having a conversation with you, so please feel free to reach out through email, schedule a Zoom, or invite us to have coffee. We'd love to meet you and talk to you about the work that we do. I'm joined here today by my teammate, Seth Bate, who's going to lead us through our second workshop of the series. Seth will be talking to us about ways to improve the communication culture of our teams and organizations. And this is a 6-part workshop series as a whole that's focused on ways we can take care of ourselves and be better prepared to navigate challenges with resilience and intention. The next 4 workshops are going to be on Wednesdays each week at this time from 11 to noon, with the last workshop being held on April 26th. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, please feel free to send me a message in the chat. I'll help to the best of my ability. I'm also going to put my email in chat in case you need to send me a private email. We have about an hour together here today, so I'm going to hand it over to Seth to lead us through this workshop. Seth, take it away.
Thank you, Zane, and hello, friends. I love seeing all these greetings pop up in the chat. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, please say hi over there. Nice to see folks from a lot of organizations we know and have worked with, and some people who are new to me. If you were on before we started, I said this, but I'll reiterate it. If you're in a place where you can use your camera and it doesn't stress you or your neighbors out, it is a real gift to the group to have you do that. It adds a lot of energy and interaction. So if you're in a spot where you can use your camera, please do, and please keep the chat buzzing. It's a mixed blessing. I've got slides which will help you keep track of what's going on today. It also means I can't see as many of you at a time, but I am going to pop those up here in a second. I am, to answer the questions from the chat, joining you from Manhattan, Kansas, where I'm doing a presentation this afternoon at the Governor's Public Health Conference. I'm seeing some thumbs up, so some of you either like Manhattan or like public health. I like both those things. But I just raced up here this morning. I saw a Newkirk friend. I raced up from my home in rural Cowley County near Winfield. And I'm in a borrowed hotel room, which is always weird, like to be in someone else's hotel room. It feels very odd, like I'm invading someone else's space. So I'll try not to be distracted by that. And you all hang with me. This also means that I don't know about quality of internet connection here. If it gets bad, let me know, or let Zane know, and I can switch to phone audio. We are here in this part of Rising to the Challenge, talking about conscious communication culture. And to be upfront, I used this opportunity as a chance to revisit some ideas that we have shared before in other settings, but also to bring in some new stuff from some old books that I still had on my shelf and some new books that people passed along to me. So in addition to the usual feedback we're looking for, I'd love to know if these things click for you, because some of these are ideas that I'm just now exploring. But my hypothesis is that most of us are in organizations and teams that have a communication culture that nobody really planned. It just sort of emerged. And that if we were more conscious about choosing the kind of communication culture we had and moving toward that, we would have more effective teams and organizations. Some of you know me, but a few things about me in case you don't. I use he, him pronouns. I work here in the Community Engagement Institute, and specifically I focus most on leadership development and coaching. Along with my colleague Sonia Armbruster, I founded the local public health leadership series, which has been going on for a decade now, and it's part of why I'm here in Manhattan at this conference. I am a local historian. I'm focused on Kansas topics, and my book about Winfield's Walnut Valley Festival, which is a big music festival that happens in Cowley County every year, came out last fall. And so if you're interested in local history or music history or bluegrass and folk music, please buy my book. And if you know somebody who goes to Winfield, please buy them my book. I am an occasional ukulele instructor. and always like to talk about ukes. And I desperately want pet goats. Yes, Dina, please do. We moved out to the country coming up on 6 years ago, and part of the deal was that I would get 2 pygmy goats as pets to just play with. And we've been there 6 years and I don't have my goats. So I want those. If any of you have an influence over my spouse, tell her we got to get on the goats. Today, what we're after are 3 things. I think we're going to get there. One is to take a look at what are some of the aspects of a communication culture that is effective. One is to, I say, learn ways to communicate with others. You know how to communicate with others, but to get more conscious about how to communicating with others based on where you fall and where they fall in an organization or team. And again, learn tactics for communication in tough moments. These are tactics that you have accessible to you, but you might try them on. Kelsey, yeah, I'm super proud of it. I love being a part of it. Thank you. I will most of the time be reading you what's on the slides. I know for some people that's a little bit of a drag, but I also know that the slides didn't print as big as that I wanted them to be. And I also know that on some devices, it's easier or harder to look at them. So I'll try to keep that up. I'm not sure you need a definition of communication, but I'm offering one just as an opportunity to start from the same place. And the Wellens, Byam, and Wilson definition is that communication refers to the style and extent of interactions, both among members and between members and those outside the team. It also refers to the way that members handle things like conflict, decision-making, and day-to-day interactions. Please let me know in the chat, or there's time for 1 or 2 of you to come off the mic if you want to talk out loud. What stands out to you about that definition? Yeah, Tricia, I hope that's true, that this has us on the same page to start this work. So Sherry says what stands out is interaction between members. That seems important. Yeah, that how you handle conflict is part of our understanding of communication, and in this session, being conscious about that communication. Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Boy, yeah, Tricia, I think that one of the things that makes this complicated is that communication means so many things. Aline says style stands out, more to it than just talking. Yeah, for sure, that it's day-to-day interaction. I think day-to-day is one of the things that stood out to me. Thank you, Patricia, because the culture is formed largely by the day-to-day stuff. It's rarely formed by the once a year, here's what we're going to do stuff, right? It's how people actually live it out. I will try to share with you a couple of sources that I especially consulted, but I did steal some stuff from John Maxwell here that I want to acknowledge as we move forward into this. Here's some ideas that Maxwell shares. First of all, this idea that interaction fuels action. Effective teams and departments, whatever is the scope of your unit that makes sense, have teammates who are constantly communicating with one another. So talking in the broadest sense of that word. You get to the action that's needed to improve something when there has been enough interaction. You might think of it as moving from communication to commitment and connection to action. And I appreciated this. Maxwell says, if you want your team to perform at the highest level, the people on it need to be able to talk and listen to one another. So I think a default when we're thinking about communication, and certainly one that I have too, is we're thinking about the sending part. And, we're reinforcing that bias today because we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the sending part of communication. but the listening part is, of course, key as well. And the interaction has to include the challenges and failures that are going on. If you're not communicating about those, you can't improve them. I say, of course, I hope it goes without saying that interaction has to include encouragement and appreciation, but it doesn't lead to action unless you're also naming, here's what's hard or here's what's not going well. This seems obvious, but also seems important. Poor communication leads to frustration. Now, lots of other things lead to frustration too. I'm not pinning it all on poor communication, but it's certainly been my experience. I think there's, I think we're ready for a poll here, Zane. There are some scenarios. I wouldn't be surprised if all of them apply, but which of these things that are going to come up on the poll most connects to your experience? And I'm going to ask you to vote. A team or project gets stuck because no one knows what the real agenda is. Important tasks don't get done because two people each think the other is doing them. Someone gets mad about a missed deadline, but the person who missed the deadline doesn't know if it was the real deadline or like the placeholder deadline. Or different teams or offices within the organization are sure the other teams or offices have it better or are even out to get them. I'm making the assumption that at least one of these connects to your experience. Please vote for the one that most connects to your experience. About 2/3 of you have answered. If you are joining on a platform that doesn't let you poke the poll, I apologize. It's fine to share your answer in the chat or just to let this one go. And I think, Zane, whenever you're ready, we can share those results.
All right, this should be shared. Everyone should be able to see how others voted.
All right, if you're seeing the same thing I did, almost half of you, most related to a team or project, gets stuck because no one knows what the real agenda is. Love to have some answers in the chat, or there's time for one or two of you out loud. What's it like when you're in that stuck moment? Seeing frustrating with an exclamation point, irritating, frustration in all caps. Yeah, Teresa, you really made that one count. Yeah, and I appreciate this, Sherry. Frustrating as everyone feels clueless. No one likes that feeling of not being sure what's really happening or what we're really after here. I'm a little surprised that so few of you, most related to the someone gets mad about a missed deadline but doesn't know if it's the real deadline. Maybe that only happens in my interactions. I feel like that's one I trip over all the time. So I'm taking it from your responses that these things actually happen to you. And so it's worth some time to keep building the kind of communication culture that we want. All right. Trying to make my poll box go away. Another thing that I hope goes without saying, but I think is worth naming, is that more communication is better. And often more communication is more equitable. So again, there are lots of things that go into making a team or work site equitable. Communication is one of them. And so when you're sharing more, of course, don't share anything that's dangerous or illegal. But the more that gets shared in all directions, the more challenges can be overcome or averted. And if you're in a culture that shares it all or shares as much as can possibly be shared, you're less likely to get caught up in habits of gatekeeping. And the less gatekeeping there is, the more likely you're moving toward a more equitable culture. So let's investigate some clues that tell you some things about your communication culture. So for instance, you might listen for what pronouns get used. And I mean this less around how we use pronouns to identify gender, but how pronouns are used in sharing ideas or making requests. So there's a difference between I want this done and how should we do this? Now, it's not a right or wrong thing. I'll admit that I have a preference, but effective cultures can be built both with I want this done and how should we do this being an operative way people communicate. But when you listen for it, you can kind of tell what culture has evolved in the space around you. Similarly, looking for clues, listen for the insider language that kind of helps people know who's part of the group or who's part of the accepted circle. No right or wrong for any of these, but they can give you insight on how communication is happening and if it's needed, ways that you can shift it. So slang can signal informality and collegiality, but it can also be heard as unprofessional, and professional is a really loaded term. And professional is a term that's been used to exclude people from the inner circle. So pay attention to how slang is used. Jargon, similarly, or the acronyms and initializations, these can include people or exclude people, letting people know, what are the 3 letters that we use as a shortcut for something is a way of bringing somebody into a group. Profanity and expressions of faith are interestingly pretty similar in how they can, in what they can say about a communication culture, because they can both be bonding, right? There's something about being with a colleague and dropping a few words that maybe you wouldn't say in front of your grandma, right? Or there's something about saying, hey, this is a time when something moving or disturbing is happening in my life, and I'm speaking about that through my faith orientation. And profanity and expressions of faith can create discomfort for people who don't respond to them the same way. So no absolutes here, but you can learn something about the kind of communication culture that's been built up around you by listening for if or how those things are used. You can also listen for what are the metaphors that people use, and are they metaphors that are widely understood? So, being in the state that most of us are in, but maybe in some ways in any state, sports metaphors show up a lot. Sports metaphors are great as long as they're for a sport that you understand enough to get the metaphor. So I'll talk in baseball metaphors all day. Basketball metaphors I'm a little shaky on. Like I know the basics, and don't come at me with your tennis metaphors. That doesn't mean anything to me. Military metaphors. I grew up as a military brat, so I'm not talking about what is it like to be in that culture, but are you a storm the field kind of organization or not? And similarly, food metaphors. Food metaphors sometimes assume a particular cultural orientation or experience, and so they can be beautifully inclusive. If you spend any time in the team that Zane and I are on, you'll hear lots of food and music metaphors, but they can also be exclusive. So cultural references too. I had a boss for a while who only spoke in Simpsons quotes. And I'm a casual Simpsons fan. It's kind of fun, but if my boss was really trying to communicate something important to me and I had to know about, what Bart did in season 14, I'd have really been left out. So notice the cultural references that are around you and consider whether they might need to be adjusted if you want to build the communication culture that you want. This isn't a slide that I'm going to read to you in detail. I just want to lift out a couple of things, and I'm going to be interested in some answers in the chat about whether the communication culture around you is more often formal or more often informal. Again, there's no value judgments here. There's some things that are useful and can be things to trip over in both these ways of communicating. One thing to pay attention to is that in a more formal communication culture, not retaining information has consequences. So a formal communication is expected to be received and remembered or filed or accessible. In an informal communication culture, it's usually less important that particular information be received, and it's generally expected that communication is less time sensitive. It matters less that we get an answer right now. Would you say that the communication culture around you is more often formal or more often informal? And if there are things that tell you which it is, I think that could be good for everybody's learning. Drop those in the chat, or if one or two of you want to come on the mic, feel free to jump in and let us know your story. I'm seeing some formal, I'm seeing some informal, I'm seeing both, or it depends on the situation. And it may depend on the topics that need addressed. Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say to those of you who are in cultures that experience some of both is, if it's generally understood what are the things that we communicate about formally and what are the things that we communicate about informally, that is more likely to build a culture that everyone understands and has an opportunity to access. There's something clean about having an all formal or an all informal organization. It's probably not practical. Just know that when you change those expectations based on situations, you may be bringing people in or you may be leaving people out. So we're going to spend a little time with an opportunity in a breakout room. My guess is that at this stage of life, enough of you have spent time in online meetings that this won't be a shake your world kind of moment. But in case it's new or it's been a while, in just a moment, you're going to get an invitation to join a breakout room. You'll be in there for about 8 minutes with, 5 or so other people. And I'm going to invite you to talk about these 2 questions that Zane's just put in the chat. What are you more aware of about the communication culture around you after considering these clues? And what might you adjust to make your communication more effective? Are there questions about the assignment? All right, we'll see you back here in about 8 minutes. All right, welcome back. Hope you got some good insights into clues about your communication culture from one another. Maybe you have a new best friend. I hope as much as possible that you are using video and audio talking to other folks, because that adds lots of energy and interaction to the learning space. Let's talk for a few minutes about some aspects of communication culture that are about which direction communication is happening. And I just want to state something that I don't think is a fact that will rock anybody's world, but in any organization, there are people who have more authority. And in your culture what leads to authority. Sometimes it's title, sometimes it's experience, sometimes it's initiative, but whatever it is that gives people more authority. When communication is happening from someone with more authority to someone who has less authority, it's important to remember the 3 C's. So one of those is to be consistent, communicate regularly, and communicate using the same channels so people have an expectation of where things are coming from. And when times are challenging, more communication is better than less. Communication ideally should be clear, don't put people in the situation of making them guess what you want. And remember that the purpose is for people to understand. So this is another Maxwell thing I stole. He says, don't try to dazzle anyone with your intelligence. Impress people with your straightforwardness. And I found that a little convicting. Like I want to be the smartest guy in the room, right? But if you have more authority, focus more on straightforward than showing off. And be courteous. And I wish this went without saying, but it doesn't. The varsity level of this kind of communication is taking time to learn more about what courtesy looks like for particular individuals. For some people, that's about how they want to be addressed. For some people, that's about how to use their name. For some people, that's about who speaks first. But learn more about what courtesy lands with other people if you're in that role of having more authority. In a situation in which you have less authority and you're communicating to someone who has more, again, maybe it's because of your title or your experience or whatever, remember that most people in responsible positions really do want to hear from you. Hearing ideas or even hearing disagreement that makes an idea better or prevents a mistake adds value to the organization. And even people who are taken aback in the moment typically ultimately appreciate this. This is also important to remember in terms of timing. So after a failure, nobody wants to hear, well, I could have told you that wouldn't work, right? People would much rather hear, even if they have more authority than you, hey, here's something that doesn't seem to work. Let's talk about this before we make a preventable error. And again, be courteous. And I wish this went without saying, but being in an authority role is tough work. So getting a sense of what does courtesy and respect look and sound like to the person you report to is the varsity level of communication here, and can help you build a communication culture that's effective for your context. Communication among teammates, people who are more or less peers. Here's some areas where, again, I think things tend to just emerge and we don't consciously choose. I think we could. So communicating your support, asking regularly, how can I be supportive, and routinely showing appreciation, in many cases, I think contributes to the culture that we want. Being vulnerable, so naming the help you need or naming the challenges that you think the team or the organization is going through can be risky, but it can be some of the most valuable communication in an organization. And staying current, by which I mean rehashing the glory days, like, wasn't it awesome when we had this, or digging up old challenges, can be a way of keeping you stuck, and it can leave out newer team members. So staying current what you're communicating about, particularly if there are things that you are trying to get to. And if you're in a situation that requires communication to the public or gives you the opportunity to communicate to the public, be responsible about what you're sharing. So you might be an organization formal enough to have a communications plan. If you have that, you should know where it is and you should follow it. But more generally, just provide responsible information. Be receptive. And this is easy for me on my not busy stress days and hard for me on my busy stress days. But if you get an inquiry about your team or your organization, treat it as curiosity that deserves a response, even if it's a dumb question they could have found on the website. That has never happened to me, but if that were to happen, and be realistic about your communication. So I'm at a public health conference right now, and you might imagine communication from public health recently has been a challenge. Some of you are also in public health world. So I don't want to dodge responsibility. I don't want to play the poor us card, but be realistic about what people can expect. And whether it's a question about rescheduling a dental cleaning or a question about a pandemic, or groundwater safety, answering realistically based on what you know, even if it's not what the listener wants to hear, is contributing to the kind of communication culture that I think is effective and that we all want. I don't have a lot of time for this, but I do want to offer an invitation. When you think about these communication directions, from more authority to less, from less to more, among teammates or peers, or team to the public, I'd love for you to add into the chat an insight that you have about one of these, or a piece of advice about how to navigate one of these, so that we can keep learning from one another. So I'll be quiet for 30 seconds and let you get started on that, and then I'll share some other thoughts. You're finishing a thought in the chat, keep it going. I'm going to share a few scenarios that might relate to you. These are kind of the communication toughies, and maybe help us shape our communication culture more than anything else when we have an idea about how we want to enter situations like this. So for some people, a toughie is when there's an angry or upset person. And what's important when you're communicating in this kind of setting is don't get defensive. If your immediate response is to protect yourself or to win, you're not likely to have effective communication. Think of it as an opportunity to go deeper and to empathize with an experience someone has had without justifying what happened or trying to sell somebody on an answer. So some things that might sound like this, just starting with a and use those things that you've learned in other trainings about active listening, for instance. Tell me more. What's that like for you? Statements of empathy, like, I can understand why you are frustrated, particularly if they're delivered sincerely, are part of creating space where people can be upset and can do the work themselves of moving through it. And that leads to an opportunity to give the work back. Now that you've had this frustration, you've named it, what do you want to do? Another situation that might be a communication toughie is that you need to apologize. And I'm not going to editorialize about the larger world beyond this talk too much, but boy, I think a lot of things could be better if people could humble themselves enough to apologize in a real way. So a guide for this is remorse, which might sound something like, I know I made you look bad in front of this client by contradicting you before I got my facts straight. I know you value your relationships with the people we serve, and you don't like to be professionally disrespected. I'm really sorry. And another R is restitution. Find a way to make amends, or at least to demonstrate that this is still on your mind. So that might sound like, I know I can't fix this entirely, but I'm going to go to each team member and explain what happened and the confusion, and that let them know that it was my fault. Similarly, rehabilitation, and this is something that takes time, but demonstrate that you've learned your lesson. And when you've reached a point where you believe you've demonstrated that, request forgiveness. There aren't any absolutes in how to do the 4 R's except for this one. If you're asking for forgiveness, do it later. It's not an in the moment thing. So I'm really sorry, please forgive me, make me feel better, is not an acceptable way of using the 4 R's. And here's something that for some people really is a toughie. If you need to express appreciation or you get to say thank you, one of the sources I consulted talked about Heidi Wall as a colleague that epitomized this for him. So the Heidi Wall method, thank the person for something specific that they did for you. So thank you for your commitment today to professional development, and specifically for taking the time to come to this Rising to the Challenge workshop. Part 2 of this is acknowledge that it took some effort. I know you have a lot of calls on your professional time. I'm confident there are other things you could be doing in this hour that would make your life easier. And it means a lot to Zane and me that you made this a priority. And part 3, if you can do it, tell the person what the action personally meant to you. Friends, I really want our communities to be healthier, stronger, and more prosperous, particularly here in Kansas where I live. And the time that you're spending today, especially if you take these lessons to heart, directly connects to that mission. So thank you for investing this time in something that means something to me. So the toughies, you need to apologize, you need to thank someone, or you need to respond to an angry or an upset person. Here's how I'm going to invite you to spend another 8 minutes or so in your breakout rooms. So start with one person, and you might only have time for one person, but one person, whoever you are, please share which of these toughies is the toughest for you and what makes it tough. And if you were living out the communication culture that you want in your team or your organization, how would you approach this tough situation? And other people in the group, please offer some feedback and some ideas. If you have time, if it feels like you've reached a conclusion, move on to another person. You might get to 2. I'd be surprised if you got to 3, but some of you people work fast, so we'll see. Are there questions about the assignment? All right, we'll see you back here in about 8 minutes. All right, I think we've got folks back. I hope that one of the person in your group got some great consultation and other people learned from that person's experience. Maybe another person got in there too. I want to share one thought about one way you could follow up with this, and then I'll tag in Zane. So one recommendation to you is think about who is somebody on your team or your department who is really contributing to an effective communication culture, who seems to be choosing it and actively doing it, and practice that Heidi Wall method of demonstrating appreciation to thank that person. So thank them for something that's specific, acknowledge the effort that it took, and tell them what it means to you. And then for yourself, notice what parts of that interaction you just had came naturally for you, build on that success, and keep going. We might have time at the end for a couple of minutes to hear from folks what you've learned from your breakouts, but I want to make sure that Zane gets to do the housekeeping stuff first. So Zane, you got stuff to tell us about surveys and what's coming up and all kinds of important things.
Yes, thank you, Seth, so much. Really quickly, I just put in chat a short evaluation, and we'd appreciate to get your feedback on that. It's really helpful for us to know how we're doing, and we're always looking for ways to improve our workshops to be more effective and engaging for you all. We've also included a place on that survey that you can tell us what topics and trainings would be helpful and engaging for you in future workshop series. So I know through previous surveys, participants had told us that self-care and navigating conflict were very important topics to them. And that helped us shape the current workshop series that we're offering now. So that's all I have on the survey. It's in the chat. I'm not going to thank people and send them out just yet because I think, Seth, you can lead us through a little more discussion with the minutes that we have.
Yeah, since we have 2.5 minutes, I bet we can get some great comments in the chat and maybe even somebody on the mic. What stood out to you from your breakout session where you helped somebody think about responding to a communication toughie?
Yes, this is Dina. In our room, we had actually several people. Tuffy was the same, which is the angry person.
Mhm.
And we discovered that we allow that individual to vent before we start trying to any further communication. One of the individuals shared that they have to go by policies on some situations, so that was really helpful as a guiding guideline for them. And then we just wanted that individual to feel like they were heard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so building a communication culture around the idea that people, even people in distress, deserve to be heard, sounds like an ideal to strive for. Could we get one more? Thank you, Michelle, for what you added to the chat. One more on the mic. What stood out to you from the communication toughies breakout time?
This is Trish, and I know one of the things that we talked about in our group, if someone is frustrated, is the definitely not being defensive and the active listening and the asking clarifying questions, because sometimes they're not really angry with you, but if you get defensive, you're not going to figure out what it is that they're angry about, and then you can't help them solve an issue if you're just, trying to protect yourself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, thank you all for playing around with these ideas. Do please use that survey. We'll use that to plan future stuff. And any comments you want to share through that, or reaching out to me about this particular presentation, since some of these were ideas that I'd put together for the first time, I'd appreciate hearing that and continuing learning from you. Thank you very much for rising to the challenge today, and I hope to see you down the road.